which we shape our cities? What does that mean for the way in which we steward our landscape? And what does that mean when we kind of take the mirror and look back at ourselves, Michael Jackson style, and understand what we can do, not just for our non-human compatriots, but also for our human and allies, and think about how we create that holistic system. So I do that through the avatars of these cute and cuddly, charismatic megafauna. And I like to think that the best way to convey some of these stories are through that, just that, stories and narratives, and these narrative arcs of specific animals that inspired me. The best way to do that, I'm gonna start here with these photos, which I'll just say were not Photoshopped. These are actual photos of an actual coyote. Some of y'all know this story, but for those of you that don't, in 2008 in Chicago, this was right around the time where I started my PhD work, there was a Quiznos on State Street in downtown Chicago. The coyote walks into said Quiznos nonchalantly, like he owns the joint, and then jumps into a drink cooler, as is evidenced by the Gatorades and the Mountain Dew, right? Hops into the cooler, looks around where people are eating their sandwiches and others are making the sandwiches for other patrons. And everybody else sees the animal, slowly backs out of the Quiznos. So the coyote then looks around, says like, yeah, I own this joint, and slowly starts to fall asleep. There's a little bit of side eye from said coyote, and falls asleep, stays asleep for a good 45 minutes until animal control comes and relocates the animal to a nearby nature area. This example for me has fascinated, it still to this day fascinates me. Why did animal A, right, Quiznos coyote, decide to hop into a Quiznos relative to any of the other conspecifics, or conspecific is just a fancy word of saying same species? Why did all the other individuals not hop into a Quiznos? Fast forward to the future. This just happened maybe about a couple months ago. Some of y'all heard of this story. It's quite remarkable. This is a photo taken inside of a Chase bank in the evening in Redwood City, California. These two raccoons were able to somehow break into this Chase looking for food. And I like to think that the inner dialogue between these two is that this individual animal is saying, oh no, we were caught on camera. And then this guy is saying, I'm not leaving until I get what's mine. So these examples again highlight something that I really want to bring your attention to, is that individual variation that's generated as a function of being in these urban systems is changing the way in which these animals not only interact with us, but how they evolve. And they're doing so in quite a rapid fashion. So hold on to that, thinking about individuals, as I bring you to this larger overarching tenet of the talk. The tenet being that social inequality is an ecological issue. And if we understand it as such, then we can start to understand and see, again, those many layers, right, of how injustice shapes our landscapes, both natural and social. And the best way to do that is to use this handsome Adonis right here. So Jeff Goldblum in the original Jurassic Park movie, I'm assuming that most folks that are on this call have seen the original Jurassic Park. If not, in one of your notebook sections, go ahead and create a new page and say the new things that I need to watch over the holiday break, because I'm going to be dropping several different pieces of pop culture knowledge for you to watch some new shows. But this one is the classic, right? Jeff Goldblum's character, Ian Malcolm, says life finds a way, in response specifically to dinosaurs finding a way in chaos, really finding its way into the park. And we know the story by now, right? The dinosaurs break out. They always break out. Here, I like to think that we can adopt this narrative for organisms in cities where life is, in fact, finding a way, ... in cities. And not just cities within the US, but cities all across the globe. For instance, urban smooth-coated otters that are found here in Singapore crossing a bike trail to, yes, raccoons in the Pacific Northwest eating some cat food, and everything in between. These animals quintessentially are experiencing things that they would have never experienced before if they were in non-urban environments. Changes to, say, noise and light pollution, food subsidies that are available to them, changes in temperature gradients and pollutants, as well as building densities, and socioeconomics. That all influences what we kind of started the beginning of the talk with, individual variation. So how gene expression and the physiology of individuals and the behavior of, say, for instance, the Quiznos coyote influences their fitness or how well adapted they are to an environment. And yeah, urban environments are their own thing. They're their own unique dynamic that has its own set of selective pressures that influences what the population is going to look like. So if you're to look at an urban coyote population and a non-urban coyote population, they look very different in terms of their behavior or potentially in terms of their gene expression. And that all has to do with us, right? So here I just want to reiterate and center that human beings, we are the directors and the audience of this screenplay. Essentially, we're the Lin-Manuel Miranda of this joint. Not only did we cast all of the cast members, we composed all of the songs, we drew the curtains, we even composed the rotating stage, but we also are acting in this play. We also are in the seats watching it unfold, as is evidenced from this photo here, where I show a buck who is chasing a young woman who likely was antagonizing said buck. So you can imagine that there were multiple intermediary steps to that animal feeling confident enough to say, no, actually, this grass is mine. All of this is mine, and you're on my territory, right? There are several steps that y'all probably have seen in your own personal experiences of certain animals becoming more tolerant and more habituated to people. This is something that we've recently highlighted in a paper we published in Evolutionary Applications, talking about how society feeds into the ecology of these species, which shapes their evolutionary patterns, which feeds back as these nature's contributions. You may also hear them be called ecosystem services. So you could have ecosystem services like pollinator services or free pest management, or ecosystem disservices, which manifest as, say, human-wildlife conflict, that all come together, coalesce, and shape the way in which these organisms respond to us. So you can imagine things like politics in the economy, focus on land, resource use management, influence human health and demographics, which all shape things like habitat modification, preference and selection, connectivity, which all influence from the genotype all the way to the ecosystem level, how animals live and survive. I'll give you a good case study that we used in the paper. That one being of mosquitoes. I'm sure that all of you have an experience of mosquitoes, good or bad. I'm assuming 99.9% of y'all are like, I don't like mosquitoes. I get it. I don't like them either. But here's the thing, right? They are one of the most important organisms in terms of thinking about vectors of disease. And a recent paper that was published coming out of Baltimore took a look at the distribution of these impervious surfaces. So essentially think concrete, like roads, buildings, and the like in urban environments. Took a look at life history traits like reproduction, body size, growth rate, and then also looked at income levels across the city of Baltimore. Here's what they found. So they were very much curious at the density and the distribution of bodies of water. Why? Well, because these bodies of water are breeding grounds for mosquitoes. And it really doesn't take much. If you leave a bucket outside and it starts to fill with water, mosquitoes will use that as breeding grounds. If anybody's a gardener, you'll know that straight up. It happens quite easily. Here's the other kicker. In many environments that have reduced vegetation and a lot of impervious surface covers, there tend to be less predators of mosquitoes. Those types of areas exist in low-income environments, low-income neighborhoods, where there's greater concrete, less tree cover. So in those areas, in those neighborhoods, mosquitoes grow faster, they reproduce more, and their body size is bigger. Why is that important? Because all of those life history traits influence how good they are at passing on these zoonotic diseases. So think like, for instance, malaria, a disease that goes from one organism to the next. So the disease load or the susceptibility to, say, mosquito-borne diseases is greatest in low-income areas because there are no predators of those mosquitoes and there are more standing bodies of water. Imagine what that does if you're an individual and you have a ton of mosquitoes in your neighborhood, or you have a ton of mosquitoes that, say, for instance, become a public health issue. Then a lot of management and resources go into trying to control that population. But maybe those management resources are not spread evenly and they're not used effectively or equally. So then mosquitoes start to grow pesticide resistance, which makes them more virulent, which makes them more of a threat to human health. I bring out the mosquitoes, but certainly I could have talked about many other examples, including brown rats, including eastern cottontail, which have exploded in the SeaTac area, including deer and several other organisms that, carry ticks for tick-borne diseases, and what that does to influence human health and demographics. In all of this, what's really important to draw out is the significance of structure. And structure here, I bring forth to you a photo of UW-Seattle's campus of these cherry blossom trees. I do so for a reason, because I want you to embody our next avatar here on the list and think about the trees. That avatar being Dr. Seuss's The Lorax. So I'm assuming most of you have either read The Lorax or watched the movie. If you have not seen the 2013 DreamWorks adaptation of The Lorax, do yourself a favor and go watch it. Danny DeVito plays the Lorax, which I think is perhaps the best cast. I mean, talk about somebody who embodies that character. So I want y'all to all think, as I show you this next slide, of some local neighborhoods that you may know that are only a half mile away from each other, right? Think like the Lorax and think about where the vegetation is. So, photo here on the left is of University Place. Photo on the right is of Southeast Tacoma. Now, most of y'all, if I were to ask you, where do you see most of the vegetation? Easily you would say, oh, it's the photo on the left. Duh. Now, here's the thing. I normally will give this talk to folks that have never been to Tacoma, so they've never seen these photos before, but they inherently or intrinsically know that if I ask them the next question being, which of these neighborhoods would you predict has a higher median household income, they almost always say it's the photo on the left. Y'all have inside knowledge because you likely have been to Tacoma, you likely have been to University Place, so you've seen these two. But in almost every city you go to, you probably could guess, oh, this neighborhood has more vegetation. You inherently know that that neighborhood probably is wealthier. That inherent cue, knowledge, it has a name. It's called the luxury effect. This idea that species richness, which is the number of species, and species biodiversity, which is the relative proportion of those species in the neighborhood, are positively associated with wealth. Now, we're going to get into why that's not always the case for all cities, but before we do, I think it's important to note which of the examples actually are showing how wealth structures ecological communities worldwide. If this is the first time you've heard of the luxury effect, guess what? I did you a solid. Here is a literature review of all of the pieces of empirical works that have looked at the luxury effect and seen these positive relationships across these many different trophic levels. So when I say trophic, what I mean here are, say, primary producers, primary consumers, which eat the primary producers, secondary consumers, which eat the primary consumers, and also sometimes the primary producers, and then tertiary consumers. So think like arthropods or invertebrates, right, at this primary consumer level. Secondary be birds and herps, whereas tertiary would be mammals like coyotes. And almost every level, we see how wealth structures the way in which these communities function, whether it be species diversity or if they colonize and occupy a particular site. This is all important because if you're, say, for instance, an ecologist like me, you're trying to think about where are the animals moving? Where are they putting their den sites? Where are they choosing to hang their hat, so to speak? And that may be dictated by social structures that themselves are dictated by wealth. So for us here locally, we have been under the Grit City Carnivore Project, as well as the Seattle Urban Carnivore Project, very much interested in documenting if there are these relationships that persist for us locally between wealth and mammalian occupancy. Should be noted that here locally, we're also connected to this larger camera trap network known as the Urban Wildlife Information Network, or UN. And UN is this partnership of researchers using wildlife monitoring techniques to understand the ecology and behavior of urban species. So we're at 29 cities and counting, including some cities in Canada, and hopefully by the end of next year, some cities in Mexico as well, to understand how organisms are navigating our built environments. To give you a bird's eye view of what that looks like for us here in Tacoma, we've been setting up cameras since fall of 2018, and y'all have been setting up cameras on Vashon for quite some time as well, to understand where these animals are moving and how they're navigating these different types of built environments along these urban to rural gradients. At any given point in time during our block seasons, which normally will have our fall field season, which we just wrapped up here in October, our winter field season, which we did in January, our spring field season will be in April, then our summer field season is in July. And we do that in order to see whether or not there's seasonal differences in what animals we see where. And we'll set up somewhere between 29 to 36 cameras within our sites within each block. You may be asking, well, why do we have variance in the number of cameras? Because we set out to put out 36, but as you work in urban systems, we're not only mitigating any potential wildlife damage to the cameras, we also are mitigating any thefts that we have on cameras. And certainly we have many a story of cameras that were stolen and stories behind those cameras and what we catch on cameras because, you know, urban ecology. So we get classic photos that look like this. The really cute ones like the black-tailed deer that's posing for its annual school picture, the troop of raccoons moving through the landscape, the coyote that is taking a look at the lure that we've placed here in order to get the animal in the cone of detection, the opossum that's doing the same. Perhaps one of my favorite photos is this one in the top right here. It's maybe about 3 or 4 blocks away from UW-Tacoma's campus, and these raccoons are just practicing their parkour, as you can see with this animal here and this animal up here. And I can't not show you videos. So the great thing about the cameras is that not only do we get still images, we get videos that look like this. Notice also, too, the timestamp, March 9th, 2020. So we got this baby bobcat right at stay-at-home orders. So one of the new assays we are hoping to do here in the future is use the data pre and post-COVID to see how stay-at-home orders, which influence human activity, are also potentially influencing wildlife activity as well. So in this next slide, I'm going to show you some preliminary data from an analysis that the entire UN network is working on. But I'm only going to show you data here from Seattle and Tacoma today, with the hope being that, in 6 months from now, we can take a look at the data from all of our cities in this analysis. So the top is Seattle, the bottom is Tacoma. And what you're seeing in these figures is the x-axis for both is income scaled by a cost of a 1-bedroom apartment, whereas the y-axis is species richness. So the number of species that we count at a site. Each of these dots represents 1 camera site, and the lines represent confidence intervals. So how confident we are that the number of species that we observe are actually the number of species that are occurring at that site. I won't get into too many of the specifics around the statistics, just to briefly say that this was taken from a Bayesian occupancy model that we ran, and the numbers that you see for each of these sites, each of these dots, are extracted from what's known as a posterior distribution. So you run a set of iterative models, they all come together and coalesce as an average, and that average you can then extract different inferences from. So what we're seeing here is a correlation, positive for both cities, even as green as they are, between species richness and income. Where yes, indeed, we too are also seeing a luxury effect here in the Pacific Northwest. Now, up to this point, I've been talking about biotic factors, aka the living factors that exist in cities. However, it should be noted that wealth structures the abiotic or non-living components of cities as well. If you are on your page of the notebook where you're writing down different shows to watch over the holiday break, I provide for you another one. Yes, it is animated, but it is incredibly awesome and culturally enriching. Avatar: The Last Airbender, which talks about earth and water and air and fire, and luxury effects abound on all of that too. We kind of got a little bit into earth, so let's get into water, let's get into air, let's get into fire. Let's start with fire. So fire here being figurative, where we're talking about urban heat island effects. This hypothesis that cities tend to be 3 to 10 degrees hotter than rural or non-urban environments. Now, this is predominantly because of the relative proportion of those impervious surfaces we talked about. So think concrete, right? Relative to green spaces. So trees and other vegetation cover. And that influences a whole host of mechanisms, including heat absorption and retention, plant transpiration and water evaporation from the soil, and water penetration. Now, if we were to do an empirical study where we looked at surface temperatures by census block across a city, then map that on to income gradients, we get a figure that looks a little bit like this, where the surface temperatures that are the hottest also tend to correspond to the areas that have the lowest income. Again, if you're the Lorax, you're thinking, oh, well, in those low income areas, they have reduced vegetation cover. Makes total sense. These are scaling mechanisms, right? If you're curious about looking at more cities, this resource here provided by NPR has many different cities in their analysis. Let's move on from fire to air. So a recent study published by Tessa et al. In 2019 took a look at air pollution across multiple cities and across multiple years for different racial ethnic groups. What was pretty artful here in this specific study was that they controlled for differences in income gradients. So in that way they could look at racial ethnic groups as a function of these controlled variables. And they created this pollution inequity index, which you see on the y-axis here. So this figure, what it's telling us is that below this 0 threshold line, if your values are below 0, you are generating more air pollution. Here, PM 2.5, which PM just stands for particulate matter 2.5. 2.5 is the measurement of the size of the particle, right? So 2.5 millimeters. So if you are below this line, that means you are generating more air pollution than you are experiencing it. If you're above this line, then that means you're experiencing more of the air pollution burden than you are generating that air pollution. This pale blue line is for white Americans across the cities that were surveyed. This orange line is for Latinx Americans. This green line is for Black Americans. So over a 15-year period, and look here, the last date was 2015. We're seeing that air pollution inequity is greatest for Black and brown communities relative to their white counterparts. Again, even after controlling for income. This is especially relevant today as we're all doing this session either in our bedrooms or our hallways, some of y'all in your closets and your kitchens because of COVID, right? Well, a lot of recent data has come out to show how air pollution hazard is linked to contracting and dying from COVID-19. One of the recent papers that was published by Kimberly Terrell et al. Takes a look at this stretch of land in Louisiana along the Mississippi River called Cancer Alley. It's called Cancer Alley because many different industrial sites, toxic waste sites, and chemical pollutants are all co-located along this stretch of land. Not by accident, by the way. After emancipation of slavery and during the era of Southern Reconstruction leading into the Jim Crow era, many Black communities were relegated to areas like this, where EPA regulations were completely relaxed, and it was the wild, wild west. Not by coincidence in that these areas tend to have the highest amount of air pollution hazard and also contribute to COVID-19 death rates that are disproportionately affecting Black Americans relative to their white counterparts, at least in this state, but certainly countrywide. Pair that with climate change, right? Our state paired with Oregon, California and several others along the West have been on fire. In some instances, so I'm from Los Angeles, parts of Los Angeles are still on fire today. This photo here on the left was taken about 2 months ago when most of the fires were raging the most strong. The photo on the right, for those of you that are movie buffs, you probably recognize it. If you don't, it's from Blade Runner in 2049, the projected 2049. I don't know about y'all. I'd rather be with Ryan Gosling than in this photo. I mean, most people would rather be with Ryan Gosling, but the point still stands that as climate change continues to ravage and as wildfires continue to ravage, these questions about air pollution inequity and who's going to feel the burden the greatest are going to be those of our currency and our future. And then finally, water, right? So even access to clean water is disparately spread across many different urban communities. These photos are all taken from Flint, Michigan, which to this day, the Flint, Michigan water crisis has not been solved. This example, similar to the others, highlights this fundamental tenet that government-sponsored policies influence the way in which people have and don't have environmental services. And that should not happen, which then leads us to what I had started this entire section off with, right? How luxury and wealth influences what animals are where. But I had slid in a little bit of a caveat. I said that's not always the case. And here, one of the recent meta-analyses that was done by Curas et al. In 2020 shows how that's not always the case. So to orient you to this figure, what they look at are many of the studies that were published on the luxury effect for flora, so vegetation, and fauna, so everything else. And then they did something really cool. They looked at land use considerations, so whether or not the study was mostly residential versus mostly non-residential. And they looked at the density of the city. So if the city was really densely packed or kind of sprawling and sparsely packed. And then they saw whether or not the study found a positive effect, like we would expect, greater wealth, greater species biodiversity, a neutral effect, meaning there's no effect whatsoever of wealth on biological communities, and a negative effect, the opposite. If an environment gets more and more wealthy, that neighborhood gets more and more wealthy, you see reductions in biodiversity. And it's not universal. So in residential systems, yeah, sure. A lot of them, the majority of the studies, the proportion of cases, tend to be positive. But if you kind of shift from residential to non-residential, it's not so clear cut. Also, if you shift from dense to sparse, not so clear cut for different organisms. And these different clades of organisms have different structures, which means that really wealth is a nice proxy, but it only gets you so far. In order for us to truly understand how these organisms are responding to cities, we got to dig deeper and understand the drivers that influence these wealth differences and these wealth disparities, which leads us to understanding how things like structural racism, classism, and oppression influence the way in which impervious surface cover, urban heat islands, all the way up to disease dynamics, influence the ecology and the evolution of the species that live around us. Which means, again, Michael Jackson, look in the mirror moment. This is us trying to understand how these animals are responding, and we need to understand how society functions to understand how they are going to respond to our environments. Should be noted, we've been talking a lot about cities, but by no means is this particular diagram just for cities. There is no place on this planet where the human footprint is not felt, even in the most remote of places. Nutrient deposition is influencing the way in which those, say for instance, in rainforests in Brazil are functioning. And therefore, we need to take a holistic, comprehensive approach to understanding how these organisms are responding to us, so then that way we all live in the system and not a system where we divorce ourselves from how that system works, because that will never happen. One of the best ways to illustrate this is through a policy that was sponsored by our US government, but still to this day has an effect on where the wildlife is and how they respond to our built environments. That policy being redlining. If you have not heard of redlining before, It essentially was a systematic denial of various services to residents of specific, often racially associated neighborhoods or communities, either directly or through the selective raising of prices. What that means in a nutshell is that banks would refuse to provide loans to potential Black homeowners if they wanted to buy in these green or these blue areas. There would also be housing agents that would choose to not show potential Black residents homes in those areas. Or they would hide in their cars and then provide information to the authorities in order for them to be surveilled. To give you a bird's eye view of what this map is telling us here from Oakland, these green and these blue regions were designated as A and B areas. They were areas that were predominantly white and wealthy communities, whereas these C and these D regions were predominantly low income and communities of color. Just a thought experiment, if I were to ask you where you think most of the industrial pollutants were placed, you probably wouldn't flinch. It wasn't near these A and B regions. It was right along this strip of land. And to this day, that still persists. If you're curious to learn more about the history of redlining and what it's done, not only to our social systems and how it's influenced residential segregation, which again, to this day, we still see, but has influenced even the natural systems that exist around cities and inside of cities, I urge you to read The Color of Law. That was written by Richard Rothstein. And also going to this resource here provided by the University of Richmond, the Mapping Inequality Project. All of these maps that you see, all of these redlined maps are of many, many different cities across the US. Now notice here where I start. I started at number 61. I couldn't even capture all of the cities that were redlined across the United States. Again, I want to reiterate, this was sponsored by the US government, signed, sealed, and delivered by the Homeowners Loan Corporation, and put into law until 1968, after the Civil Rights Movement abolished redlining. But you can imagine that in areas like Tacoma for us and Seattle, that was only 50 some odd years ago. You're probably asking, well, it still has an effect on our habitat, right? You'd be right. A recent study that was done by one of my colleagues, Dexter Locke and others, took a look at this tree canopy cover and saw across these A through D graded regions where tree canopy cover was greatest. And what they found in the 37 US cities that they surveyed, in almost every single city, A regions and in some instances B regions preferentially had greater tree canopy cover than C and D regions. Redlining was abolished in 1968, y'all. This was done this year. So the effects of residential segregation and racial oppression are still felt to this day on the land we walk, in the cities that we roam, in the roads that we drive. This all influences what organisms are where, how coyotes navigate the landscape, and how they perceive our landscapes. Which now I've shown you a ton of evidence from the literature and some of the work that we have put together of late, summarizing many of those pieces of literature about how social inequality is an ecological issue. So that by that tenet, now we can state that environmental justice and anti-racism are perhaps the best tools that we have for urban conservation and sustainability. I would argue that they are the tools that need to be centered for us to think about deconstruction of our systems, reconciliation of previous structural harm and violence, and community mobilization around these issues, where we think about humans and people as a singular system to all come together and lead with compassion and lead with justice. Should be noted that these conversations are not new, right? This is not me bringing up new things, but really summarizing things in a different light, using the cute and cuddly coyote to package it in a different way to illustrate this point that civil rights, right, should serve as a prerequisite to environmental health. And if we do so, then we start to see environmental health that helps not just human, but non-human communities as well. And this fight is one that we currently are doing ourselves, right? We are in perhaps the largest civil rights movement that has had, because it has expanded globally after George Floyd's murder. It continues to this day. And hopefully that motivation will help us to continue to move forward to see how our systems are all connected and how the way in which we treat each other is the way in which we treat our natural systems as well. So that means when we think about conservation, you may have likely taken a course or been to a talk with somebody who's a conservation biologist, and they talk to you about relocating animals, having them have great breeding success, increasing genetic diversity, all well and good. But those will never see long-term success if we don't center our conversations in building equitable capital and fighting poverty. For instance, if we were to create affordable housing that reduced the amount of displacement of peoples across a landscape, that increases ecological stability as well. Stability of people begets stability of organisms. That allows for more native organisms to survive in our environment. Another good example, creating accessible healthcare for all peoples allows for a greater amount of positive environmental health for not just human societies, but animal societies as well, as is told by this One Health framework, the idea that wildlife health influences human health and vice versa, as is seen again from COVID, which was originally a disease from wildlife, all the way down to strengthening voting rights, making sure that everybody has a voice and that voices that were disenfranchised and marginalized in the past are amplified in order to talk about these conversations in ways that allow us to come together around saving ourselves and the planet. And that part starts with us, right? It starts with us, starts with, if there are kids on this call, it starts with y'all, right? You have a bunch of power, and in that power, you have the ability to wrest power in others as well that may not necessarily have the same amount of power. It starts with us in community mobilization, and in doing so, in the love that I have for my organisms, I have been able to find my way back to many of my lived experiences of what it means to be a Black man in America. And animals like this help me do that. So I'm just, to conclude, wanted to show you a video. Apologize if it's a little bit stilty, but it's of a captive coyote facility in Millville, Utah, where I did a bunch of my work. I like to joke that my entire dissertation was based on puppies and how puppies learn, which is not too hyperbolic. It is actually the case. And here's one of those examples. So this puppy is about 7.5 weeks old, which, if you guys are DC fans, you know Kal-El is Kent, aka Superman. He is 10 feet away from me. I'm just sniffing, nonchalantly saying, all right, you're here, but whatever. Over to the rest of the family. And his parents are their way and say, we're good. We're gonna. The question for me of individual personality led me to understand what are the mechanisms of that, which led me to think about diet and the environment of those organisms. And how you start to understand genius. There are these mosaics. Why are they heterogeneous? Why are they mosaics? In cities, it's, and if it's due to people, then that means the way in which society functions influence the way in which these animals thrive and survive in our environments. Thank you all for coming this evening talk and discussion. All to the UW collaborators, as well as to everybody on Vashon for this work that you have that have helped with the multi-city network of data that you've recently, EcoEvo, RCN, and the School of Interdisciplinary. With that, I will open for any questions.
Thank you, Chris. Let's see if we can, if anybody wants to see, we can do questions a couple different ways. We can have you unmute and just go for it. We could try that. We got 42 people here, so that might be a little chaotic, but we can try it. And if that's too chaotic, we can just do chat questions and we can go one after another. But let's try just if you have a question, unmute yourself, ask your question, and then mute again and give Chris a chance to answer. How about that?
What was your original, like, what made you get into this type of study about this?
Yeah, I did work in Chicago as a graduate student, but even before then had coyotes kind of all over the place, but had inherent differences across neighborhoods. Los Angeles, a really good handful of examples that it's hard for you to walk through a neighborhood and not know where when you live next to but you're not like, oh, there's millions of dollars here and look at all the trees, and you're like, well, my neighborhood.
Chris, I hate to interrupt you, but you're glitching up a little bit, and I'm wondering, do you have a lot of stuff open on your computer? Maybe you can close.
No, I actually only have the video, but if
it might be
certainly
yeah,
video and turn it back on, if that.
Maybe let's try that.
Yeah, I'll keep my video off just to the question, and audio work a little bit better.
That does sound a little bit better. Let's see if it works.
I'll go with that until it decides it wants to work again.
Sounds good.
I was always interested in kind of canids and how they survive around people. I was one of those kids, I think a lot of y'all are, where you would watch nature shows for fun and you would just really enjoy it on PBS, and you hear Sir David Attenborough and be excited about it. But when I went to graduate school, there weren't many conversations about how these animals were living in urban systems, and there were almost no conversations about how different types of within city habitats are influencing where the animals are. And it was conversations like these with many community members in Fort Collins and Denver, Colorado, here throughout the Pacific Northwest, in different areas in Chicago, that really made me think much deeper about combining what I had seen personally growing up in LA and what I had learned academically. And that led me to think, well, if a coyote lives, for instance, if y'all know a little bit about Chicago, the north side and the south side of Chicago, very different. So I had thought to myself, the north side of Chicago coyotes probably have a much cushier life than the ones in the south side of Chicago for a bunch of reasons. The green spaces are larger. The relative amount of impervious surface cover is very different. All of that probably induces some level of variance, right? But many of the ecologists at the time that were interested in cities only studied animals in the north side of Chicago. And that bothered me, because just like as a scientist, you would want to sample as evenly as possible, as evenly as you possibly can. So then that's what led me, I think, when we touched down here in Tacoma, to start addressing many of these questions.
Was there anyone that you worked alongside with that you helped you find out or come to any conclusions that you really enjoyed working with?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so there are some folks that recently I had published a paper with. Max Lambert is one of them, who's a postdoc at UC Berkeley. Naima Harris, who is at the University of Michigan, and several others, several indigenous scholars like Danica Miller, who is one of the faculty at UW-Tacoma, that does awesome work speaking with community members, as well as all of my collaborators with Vashon Nature Center and Point Defiance Park and Aquarium, because y'all have been doing the work for quite some time, talking to community members about how they feel about coyotes. So it helped a lot to get an understanding from people's different opinions of the animals, and then doing talks like this. So Bianca had alluded to one of the Grit City Think and Drinks that I did the first year I was here. And there was excellent conversation with a bunch of community members about their experiences with these animals and what that means to them. And bringing in those stories helped to really encapsulate this larger narrative of how these systems are connected.
Chris, we have a chat question.
Uh-oh, Bianca, we lost your audio for a bit. I think you muted yourself.
Sorry, I muted myself on accident. Nature girl trying to do technology. Andrew Simon from up in Canada says, I'm sure you've heard the claim that green spaces promote greater health outcomes. For example, suggesting that greenery predicts all these positive social benefits. Your research turns this upside down in a compelling way. Can you comment?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think previously environmentalists and conservationists would almost always argue increase the amount of green space in an area and that will benefit everybody. Now, while the access to green space is incredibly important for all human communities, here's a caveat. Just putting in the green space is only a piece of the answer. And the way in which we conceptualize what that green space looks like is very narrow. So what do I mean by that? There is this term called green gentrification. It specifically refers to when you plant trees or some folks are very much happy about it because, yeah, sure, it helps to reduce our carbon footprint. But if you do it without any policies in place that guard against gentrification and displacement, human communities are then relegated outside of the neighborhoods that they grew up and knew and live in. Why is that important as an ecologist? Well, it's kind of like kicking the can down the road, because what ends up happening is that there are more housing developments created further outside of the city that would have fragmented habitats that could have been really good for those wildlife communities. So this green gentrification essentially does more harm than it does good. Also, there are community members that say, I don't want trees, not just because it increases property taxes, not just because it increases cost of living, but because it may bring in more pest species. And rightly so. Like some species of trees bring in more arthropod pests without the predators to eat them. So then there are more costs to pest management. The suggestion or compromise, build urban gardens or green roofs that allow for creating these ecological stepping stones, if you will. So imagine bees as they're moving across the landscape. Not only will bees gain in terms of genetic connectivity and not experience these bottlenecks where they just go locally extinct, they also will serve, these urban gardens will serve as a means of food sovereignty for many urban communities. So we can subvert the question of creating more green city spaces and say, yes, the green city spaces can be created if and only if there are policies written in law that make sure people are stable within their neighborhoods. Because there's a lot of community and traditional ecological knowledge that benefits the biodiversity within those systems. Try my video again and see if it works better now.
Are there any more questions? That was a great answer. It was a lot of stuff that I hadn't thought of before, Chris.
Thank you.
Really cool. Yeah.
Oh, that's a good question, Brooklyn. Brooklyn asks, is there anyone specifically who inspired you to choose to pursue your career? Yes, my undergraduate mentor, Sarah Woolley, Sarah is a neuroethologist. It's a fancy word of saying she studies the brain and behavior and how different brain mechanisms influence different behaviors. And when I was an undergrad, and here's the real story, right, behind the journey. When I was an undergrad and I said I liked science, many members of my community in Los Angeles or otherwise would say, oh, okay, cool, you'd be a great medical doctor. And I had internalized that. So I took the chemistry courses and the molecular biology courses and the biochemistry courses. And in Chem 2, I got a C plus. In molecular biology, I got a C minus. And if I hadn't dropped biochem, I would have failed that class quick, fast, and in a hurry. Which is all to say that just because you don't do well in one single class doesn't mean you're going to be a good researcher. I put that out there right now. So I had tried to do these classes my first year, didn't do so well. My first summer, after my first year, my freshman year, I did a immersive 2-month research experience in the Dominican Republic that was sponsored by my university, Columbia University. And I like to tell folks, the first species I ever studied were tarantulas and golden orb weavers, which I also think are cute, but most people don't believe me when I say that. So that was the gateway. And I said, all right, well, maybe let me try some of the medical stuff a little bit more. I took a class in molecular biology, again, bombed it. And then remember calling my mom and saying, Mom, I don't think this is right for me. This is definitely not the right road. And she said, follow your path. Your path is what you like, not what everybody else does. The very next semester, I took an animal behavior course with Sarah Woolley, which Sarah is just awesome. She's still at Columbia. She has a lab full of zebra finches, these small little passerine species from Australia. They're super cackly and very noisy, but they're very endearing and all have tons of personality. And she showed me the ropes of what it was like to do science and what it was like to communicate science. There was a point in time where it was the first time I had ever done a science presentation for graduate students and faculty as an undergrad, and fumbled a little bit. And when I did, she asked me some leading questions for me to get back on track. And it just was one of those signs where she was one of the best allies and advocates I ever had. I like to finish the story by saying that she did her PhD work at UW Seattle in their psychology department. So it's just so fitting that I ultimately ended up in the UW system as a faculty member through her tutelage. And then Atticus asked the question, what is your favorite part of working in biodiversity? I would say it's the reflection of how communities and systems work together, and how if they work together effectively, then they show this extraordinary beauty that is beyond anything that Disney could teach you, right? And I reflect that on how if human communities work as harmoniously, that we too could get there. Now, mind you, like not all communities are great, right? But I think the interactions and how those interactions play a role are really fantastic. So for instance, I'll tell folks, and Bianca will know this line, I dropped it during the Grit City Think and Drink, that coyotes by some people are not necessarily liked, but I think of them as the heroes that we need, even though they're not the heroes that we want. That's a Dark Knight reference there, because they provide a bunch of ecosystem services. So when we're talking about biodiversity, these organisms serve as apex predators because they'll end up eating the secondary predators, like say domestic, eat tons of birds and small rodents. If those small rodents and birds are alive, then they eat more of the arthropods, like mosquitoes. So those mosquitoes populations get regulated, which influences the abundance of different diseases within the environment, which decreases the amount of vulnerability of human populations to mosquito-borne diseases. So coyotes are our best indirect and direct source of pest management. And the lessons of biodiversity kind of teach us that, right? Like they help regulate these systems in ways that are to the nth degree amazing. and yeah, just awesomely endearing creatures.
I have a question. Is it okay to ask now?
Yeah.
So, Chris, thank you. You've connected so many dots across conservation, biodiversity, public health, neuroscience. And I'm curious if you're part of, or if you know of any efforts to create messaging to influence public opinion that is really integrated, that also includes the public health side of this. I heard you talk about how having healthcare for all would actually benefit biodiversity. And, I come from the healthcare, public health side of things, and we work for that stuff, but nobody's talking about how this is also good for biodiversity. And are you aware of any groups that are actually putting together the messaging that shows just how connected this all is for the purpose of influencing public opinion and public policy?
Yes. Yeah. So there are a few that are emerging, and one of my good friends who's at Lincoln Park Zoo, Dr. Maureen Murray, is working on just that. So she's a wildlife epidemiologist and thinks about these issues quite a bit. And her and I and several others through the Lincoln Park Zoo and the Urban Wildlife Institute are working on initiatives that are forward facing to the public and also community organized to think about ways that biodiversity and human health, public health are connected under what's known as this One Health framework, right? That the health of all living communities influences all other living communities. There are also several local organizations here, including also the city of Seattle, that are starting to think about these issues more holistically. Now, mind you, they move a little bit slower than maybe a cultural institution like a zoo would, but they are creating initiatives that help to think more sustainably about these issues, as well as the Port of Seattle and the Port of Tacoma, and several organizations like Metro Parks Tacoma that are starting to consider these options and how they're all related accordingly. The UW system has been thinking about this a bit, but hasn't really connected some of the departments that would do some of that work justice. However, one of my really good colleagues, Dr. Cleo Wolf-Erskine, does this work as well through the Urban at UW program. And hopefully we'll be talking to public health department as well. So there are lots of connections here locally as well as connections nationally. That narrative has not really splashed on the national stage as of yet, but I think given the dynamic of COVID, which just as a quick preamble, right? COVID, at least the strain of COVID that we currently are being plagued with as a pandemic, has been hypothesized to either originate in a species of bat or be transferred from bat to armadillo, and that connections that didn't exist in the past with human-wildlife interactions did as a function of continued urbanization. So bats that normally harbor these SARS viruses, it just so happened that there was a specific strain that rapidly, after mutating, was able to spread throughout human communities. That's we are living in a human wildlife interaction that influences public health that's all about biodiversity. If those regions were more biodiverse, theoretically, right, like the ways in which those populations are regulated, the predator of whatever species had COVID could have stemmed that tide. But we've reduced predators so much on the landscape that they don't perform the same function. So we're somewhat at a loss. And human beings, we can't replace that. Like we can't replace wolves on the landscape. We're not as good. We're not as adept.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Well, this is great, Chris. We've got one more question in the chat, and then maybe I know you got a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. You got to attend to here soon.
Right.
But let's look at this. It's got a marine connection. It's from Andrew again, and he says, let's see, I missed it, but we got a couple things in the chat.
Sure.
Let's do Anne's, because it just came in here. It says, as biologists, how can we be more open to the potential positives of the Anthropocene?
Yeah, I think Changing the question, and I saw one other about the Sailor Sheen. I can answer that one from
Okay,
Andrew
great.
as
You
well,
saw that
really
one.
briefly.
Good.
But changing, like having a paradigm shift of how we understand these systems, because to be frank, there, at least in the last several million years, there hasn't been a system where human beings haven't been impacting it, right? Indigenous communities have been working with these systems, and in fact, recent studies of late have shown that systems with indigenous presence actually increase native biodiversity by 80%. So it's not like human beings have been divorced from these systems. And that narrative was very much built up by American settlers, colonialists, and white supremacists, John Muir being one of them, where we're reconciling some of the history that they taught us about natural systems not having people in them at all. That's entirely false. So when we think about the Anthropocene, really, it's not an encapsulated period where human beings are now doing a bunch of destructive things. It's important to note that there are few actors with the majority of power and privilege in industries that are driving these changes, and that the majority of Americans actually want to see sustainable action. But we don't have the power to be able to make those decisions. We need to change that. And then there was a question Andrew had posted about looking at research in patterns of industrialization and how they influence marine environments. No, I don't know of any. That's wide open. There are some things here and there in more pristine systems, but in urban systems, urban aquatic environments have not been addressed, and I think is probably going to be the next frontier. And then there's one more question that I think Jordan asked. When students discussed your research in class, they were curious about paths forward. What can white people do on Vashon? If you were in charge of a city, what would be some of the first steps you would take to address racism and social justice to have the greatest benefit for people and biodiversity? If you are a white person on this call on Vashon Island, Vashon is mostly white, you have quite a bit of power, right? So just the power in voting. Voting is really, 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 really important. I can't not emphasize that enough. And also thinking about your impact on the landscape, what that means for said landscape. So if you love and or hate coyotes, I don't judge either way. One of the best ways to avoid conflict, don't feed the wildlife, right? That's probably wildlife 101. Don't feed the wildlife. And if you can, keep your cat indoors, because that also is an incident for conflict. If you are talking to communities of color, amplify those voices in those communities by giving them the stage, right? So create a forum like this and then say, like, here we have person X, Y, and Z to talk on this, that are people of color or women or from the LGBTQ community, all of which have a different history, rich tapestry, and ecologies to provide to many of these issues. And then if I was in charge of a city, certainly creating affordable housing is the very first thing on my docket. And that affordable housing, wherever it may be, paired with talking to community members like y'all about, okay, well, what trees can we plant that maybe they're not natives, but they serve the same functional role that allows for everybody to have access to nature and have the ability to just walk outside and walk in nature. Which, it should be noted that when you increase the amount of green space in specific environments, you reduce crime as well. So just having that access increases physical health, mental health, reduces crime, produces less of a burden on our public health care systems, which just saves us a ton of money. So if I'm talking to economists, I'm pretty much saying straight up, look, you spend $100 million now, we're going to save $500 million later, right? And that just starts with affordable housing and healthcare. That's what I would do if I was in charge of a city. Not that this is like my pulpit for president, but yeah, I think there are ways to do it. We have the resources. We just got to allocate them accordingly.
Wow, Chris for president. I like that. Hey, thank you so much, Chris. This has been amazing. And if we get some more questions, or people, can we funnel them to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So here is my email address. Oh, I sent that privately. Let me send that not privately. It's just CJ Schell at uw.edu.
Great. Yeah, I can put that there.
Yeah, and you guys can also reach out to me through Twitter as well, whatever is easiest.
Great.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, friends. I appreciate you.
Yeah.
Have a good evening.
Okay, you too. All right. So, wow, that was a great talk. Kind of blew my mind, as he does often. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Maybe we can just, let's see, it's 8:11. Maybe we can just do a quick stretch, bathroom break if we need it. If people need to go, I know this is a long meeting, I understand. We can reconvene here at 8:15. And I'll just tell you what's up next. I'm going to give you a little summary, introduce you to the course mentors and collaborators. And Maria's going to I'm going to give you a summary of the iNaturalist data, and Maria of the products from all of you during the course time. And then we're just going to open up for discussion for people who have course feedback for us. We also have a feedback form that I think you got in your email, so you can fill that. Okay, we'll get started again here. Hopefully people are getting back in. So I wanted to start with just a quick run through of all the people that have contributed to this course. And then I'll go through the iNaturalist data. But, you know, Chris, we're really grateful to him for contributing, for coming here, and he helped with some of the course as well. Andra DeVote, if you want to just do a little wave as I call each of you out. Andra did our grounding exercises. She's the founder of Insight Physio on the island. She's a practicing physical therapist and public health expert. And then Annie Brule, if you want to give a wave. Annie is a professional artist and illustrator. She's done a lot of education about art and nature, and she helped us with the biological illustration in the course. Adrian Swain, I don't know if he's here tonight, but he was a course mentor, and I want to encourage all of you to think of these course mentors as mentors forever. So you're going to love that, aren't you, course mentors? So you can always ask them questions if they come up, or ask me if you can get a hold of me, and I'll point you to the right person. Vale Martinez Espinosa is there. You want to wave, Vale? Vale helped us with the Spanish translations and with actually getting some good curriculum and course creativity in there for that speaks more to the Latin community, which was great. And Maria Metler, you know her name by now. She's been kind of holding down the fort for everything here, and is also a course mentor. We had Jerry Wilson and Roxanne Lyons, who are board members of ours that if you guys want to, there's Jerry. Jerry's a retired elementary school teacher, and Roxanne has a lot of experience also in education through the Vashon schools and beyond, and also nonprofit stuff and racial equity. So both of them helped in advising us throughout this course, which is great. Andrew Simon, who I hope is still here. Andrew, I don't know if you're, oh yeah, you're there. If you have enough internet connection way up there on Galiano Island in Canada, you can pop in and wave at some point. But Andrew is the head of Emerse, which is the nonprofit that is a Canadian organization that's leading the community science effort that we're part of to catalog the biodiversity throughout the Salish Sea region. And then Catherine True is our communications and outreach. You wave there. Catherine helped us proofread and edited all of our content. So she was the one that made sure we sounded nice and intelligent. So thank you, Catherine. So this is, this is a good example of how diversity and how a whole bunch of people can come together to make a course, and it's very well needed for sure. And we're hoping as this course evolves and grows that we get even more voices and experts involved. So now I'm going to switch and see if I can share my screen with you guys, and I'll show you some of the things that came out with the data that you collected. Okay. So everybody see that? All right, so Maria, if you could just monitor chat or tell me if things are going wrong. All I can see right now is my screen, so give me a heads up.
No problem, I got it.
Okay. So it was super fun for me, who loves data, to go through our iNaturalist highlights and look at them a little bit more. This is our pilot program that started on Vashon. So most of our data came from Vashon this time around, but I want you guys to see if you can look at this Everyone Counts program that project that's in iNaturalist. Here, you can do a search bar here. Because over time, we're now getting people who are interested on the mainland. We're getting people up who are going to be doing it up in Canada, and also maybe as far away as Costa Rica. So we might see some little dots popping up of plots all over the world pretty soon. So be sure to come back to this page once in a while and check for new biodiversity pictures from around the world, hopefully someday. So the Vashon Biodiversity Project is the parent project for the stuff that we're seeing here on Vashon. So everything that you guys record on Vashon goes into the Vashon Biodiversity Project here. And this is where we have stored a lot of our data from all of our BioBlitz surveys and other wildlife surveys we've done on the island. And if your data falls within those boundaries, it will be caught by this project. And this project feeds into the larger biodiversity projects of the Salish Sea. So these are all the partners that we're working with. Here we are here. These are all the partners that we're working with throughout the Salish Sea to map the biodiversity. And I'll go into this a little bit at the end because we have an interesting placement in this whole scheme of things geographically. Okay, so I'm going to go back to this and show you our starting species count in the Vashon Biodiversity Project was 2,054 species. That was including stuff from our BioBlitz surveys and people's random contributions to the iNaturalist site. We ended at the end of Everyone Counts at 2,180. So we added 126 species. Some of that was added by Everyone Counts participants. Some of it was added by people who were just adding things during that time, and it was hard to pull them apart. But that's pretty cool. 126 new species, and I'll show you kind of where there's some interesting things about those. Those will change a little bit over time because as we get better identifications, we might get less species there because we find out that they're the same as other ones we've already recorded when we get down to a good enough taxonomic level. But for right now, 126 is pretty impressive for this. The other thing, besides picking up new species, we get a chance, because we're doing these plots and we're having to be pretty systematic about recording everything, we get a chance to see what are our most popular species or common species. And so we got sword fern was our most cataloged species in these plots, which is interesting, followed by western red cedar, salal, big leaf maple. And so the neat thing about this is that we will possibly be able to pick up changes in these common species over time if this project goes long enough. For example, we're seeing some places on the mainland now where sword fern is dropping out of the understory because it's getting diseased for some reason. And so if we have these frequency data, we can see if those frequencies are changing over time. So that's a pretty neat thing that we can do with this data. Here are some photos from you guys that you found in your plots here. Karen Davis found a really cool seaweed here that we hadn't picked up. It's not super rare, but we just hadn't picked it up in our BioBlitz surveys, even though we have beach surveys each time. And so that was a really important record to add to the list. The other thing about doing these plots is it forces you to not just record the stuff that catches your eye, but actually record everything that's there. And so for the first time, we got a dandelion, common dandelion record that must have been in the middle of somebody's plot, because but nobody has ever thought to put that on iNaturalist before for Vashon Island. So that's kind of a neat thing that is filling in the holes a little bit. We're also getting some really cool photographs of existing species. So if you're a photographer and you want to continue to contribute to iNaturalist, having really good species is really good for our natural history record. We also were getting species where we had, like for this tribe of moth, we had adult records, but we didn't have any larvae. So now we know, okay, the larvae are on Vashon Island. And fungi I'm going to go into in a bit. Also, we have some animal signs. We did a deeper look at, what happens in your plot when you're not there. iNaturalist can actually categorize some sorts of scat. So you can put photos of scat. This is raccoon scat from my plot, which literally happened the actual week we were doing the animal signs lessons. So that was pretty nice of that raccoon to stop by then. Fungi was amazing. These are all pictures that were turned in. Some of these are from the photos here, down here, give credit. Some of these were from the high school class. And we had, of those 126 records, 46% of them were fungi. And so that is really a huge resource that you contributed this time. Most of our BioBlitz surveys that are stored on iNaturalist happen early spring through summer. And so that's not such a great time for fungi. So we don't have really good, strong fungi lists. So having all of these new mushrooms on iNaturalist is pretty exciting. And it's exciting for a couple of reasons. I just talked with a colleague at Puget Sound Ecological Society who lives on the island, Ren Hudgens, and he is going to see if he can get some people to tune into iNaturalist and get some good IDs, research grade IDs for these, so that we have them for Vashon. So that'll be great. The other thing about fungi is they're an entire animal kingdom, or I mean, they're an entire kingdom, not animal, taxonomic kingdom, and they have really important implications for global warming. They have big mycelium networks. So these are the fruits that we're seeing of these larger organisms that are under the ground that contribute to what people call the wood wide web. And that wood wide web taps into all the roots of plants and shrubs, and it helps those plants and shrubs uptake carbon from the atmosphere and get nutrients and grow. And so there's a really big component of stable fungi associations and remediating global climate change. So here are a couple really cool new finds, rare finds. These are new species that popped up. We had somebody do a dive off of Maury Island Marine Park and come up with some really cool species. This is a Nanaimo horned dorid, which is a first record for Vashon Island. And this is a new record for a sea star, the Trojan star, and it's the only record for South Puget Sound. These are subtitle. And this is a cool find, especially in light of sea star wasting disease that's been wreaking havoc on a lot of different sea stars. So it was nice to see that down there. And then a rough keyhole limpet here too, which was the first photo for Vashon. And then this is from Harsey Parker, who found this little snail. You can see here for scale. And I want to encourage you guys to look for these. These are associated only with trees in the forest. It's about 2 millimeters long. The experts that weighed in on iNaturalist think it is a Vertigo rowelli, which would be the first record on iNaturalist for the entire state of Washington. They need a good picture of the aperture, which is the opening And so if you see any snails that are tiny like this and look and amber and look kind of like this, try to take a picture of the aperture and get it on iNaturalist so we can really tell if this is the species we think it is. And that would be a first for our state. And it's native. Okay, so thank you for contributing to this effort. I wanted to say one more thing about our position in the Salish Sea. We're right, if you can see, we're the southernmost project right now. Maybe as more people in Tacoma start to take records, we'll have more of a southern distribution for the Salish Sea. But that is an important spot to be because we're kind of a gateway. If you think about it, for climate change, we're getting a lot of species that are starting to shift their ranges northward slowly. And so we might be a gateway for detecting those new species as they shift. We might be the first detection system of all of these efforts. And our northern border, Cortez Island, might be also kind of a gateway as a species tend to migrate even farther north as we go. So our little backyard plots could be pretty important as time goes on in assessing the biology and the biodiversity of this region and how it's changing. Okay, so I'm going to stop the share now and give it over to let's see, Maria. Do you want to start yours and then we can take any questions after that?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Get my speaking voice going and not my listening voice. I think it's taking a second to give me permission to share my screen. There we go. Okay. This has been such a lovely evening. So I am excited to share with you. I'll try not to take too long because we really want to leave room for you all to give us some feedback. So can you all see that? Everyone counts. Yay. Oh, this has been such an amazing journey to be on with all of you. As Bianca said, I'm going to go through a little bit of the participant breakdown and share some of the awesome work that I've been receiving that everybody deserves to see. So from what we can estimate, we had just about 800 participants registered, which included community members, as well as, which were from about 5 years old. The youngest might have been 4. We're still, if anybody knows, anybody younger than 5, I would love to know. And we think the oldest one was about 92 participating in this course. So we managed K to grade, just like one of our goals. As in that 800, there was also a number of teachers, 17 teachers with their students that participated, and those students ranged from kindergarten to 9th grade. So I'm just going to run through all the different sessions here and show you some of the highlights of what was shared with me. This was a sketching from Jerry Wilson, one of our board members who's here tonight. Hi, Jerry. From session 1, Your Senses Are Your Superpower, where you selected a sit spot and tuned in to take a tour of your senses. Don't have much from session 2 when we explored and actually went out and chose our biodiversity survey plots. But here's session 3, Searching for Sound. This is from Karen. I think you're here tonight too. Got a lot of Karen's work here, and another sound map from one of Jordan Fostering's high school students. Patterns in Nature, session 4, we had some beautiful nature art that was sent back to us. Session 5, our biodiversity survey. This is Waylon. I think he may have been our youngest contributor to iNaturalist. He and his mom conducted the biodiversity survey together. You can see his data sheet over here next to him. and like Bianca already pointed out, really cool that we've got some new observations, including the common dandelion. So that's one of the great things of community science is sometimes some of the things that we larger minded scientists go out and we try to find the rarest thing or the most unusual thing, and we forget to record things like dandelions. Session 6, go outside at night. I just love this simple sketch of the moon. From my spot, I couldn't see the moon at night, so I was thrilled to get this back. Biological illustration, I would probably guess, I would love it if you put your favorite session into the chat. I think biological illustration was probably our favorite, the most well-received session, Annie, just so you know. So pat yourself on the back. It was really fun to do. We got a lot of great work here. You can see up in the corner some, I think that's watercolor, Jerry, is that right? And again, in the middle, Catherine Davis was inspired to do some watercolor. We've got some pencil sketchings down here and a nice watercolor as well from Piper, one of our 5th grade participants. So here Annie did a great job of not only putting together that unit, but helping promote it online, which Valet did too in a lot of our units. Life Connections was fun. And it was fun to have the Sasquatch cameos. Dig In, where we got to explore the mycorrhizal networks and the Wood Wide Web. Taking your skills on tour. Most of us had sit spots in the forest, but Karen's was on the beach. So she was able to add a lot of diversity to some of the feedback that we got. So when she moved into the forest, and this is a great sketching there. And just give you a second to read those two. Jerry Wilson helped us put together this writing in nature session. And what I like about both of these is that they, without really anything more than words, you get a sense of where they were, what the season was. There's a lot that's portrayed in just those simple words. So some more words from participants. I cannot believe the course is almost over. I'm enjoying the ritual of it and I'm thinking to keep it up. Besides, I want to observe how the site changes over the seasons. Going into this, I was very fidgety, but now I feel very calm. You guys have made my homestay here so wonderful. This program has brought me so much joy during these hard times. It made me think that I should appreciate nature's calm more. And thank you, thank you, thank you. It was so good to get students outside doing meaningful science and mindfulness. I've been feeling really connected to place in a way I haven't before. I've even begun to recognize individual animals. Everyone counts as a deep dive into connecting to place and as a great antidote to screen fatigue. I'm intrigued to continue on my own and see what happens in the spring and summer. It's interesting to see how my spot changes over time. Those comments really captured exactly what Bianca and I and those of us who helped us envision this course were hoping people would get from it. So getting that feedback is really heart fulfilling for all of us. We've also had some good recognition beyond our island shores. If you haven't seen within our shorelines, if you haven't seen the Beachcomber article that Susan McCabe put out for us, it was really great. We also, I presented on Everyone Counts at the E3 virtual conference, which is the environmental educator professional networking organization in the state. And that got us a lot of interest. So there's actually quite a few people who aren't registered, teachers in Everett, teachers in Port Orchard, a couple teachers in Tacoma and the greater Seattle area that we know are using these resources, which is really exciting to us. I was invited to also speak at Islandwood just yesterday, or I think the day before. They invited me really last minute because of that presentation. So there's a lot of interest in this, as well as with our partners up north of the border in Galliano with Immerse, which Bianca kind of talked about a little bit before. And hopefully, as she highlighted, maybe Costa Rica, we don't know. So we're really excited about the potential of where this course can go, because this was just a pilot course for us. We're still getting our wings. Is that how you say it? Little nod to Amelia Earhart there. In the future, we really want to improve this for Chautauqua, that we got some feedback that it can use a little bit of lightning for our younger students. So we're hoping to redesign the K through 5 sessions, or sessions for K through 5 learners. We want to make journals so that there's something a little bit more concrete to have than the data sheets. And we're hoping to align the sessions to state learning standards, which should help teachers incorporate them into their classroom. We're looking to incorporate all participant feedback. We want to expand throughout the Salish Sea and well beyond, as Costa Rica exemplifies. This map shows you, this is a map of the native languages throughout the region. And we also, on that note, want to increase the diversity, including tribal voices and other members of underrepresented communities, and offer teacher workshops and trainings, as well as just continue to get participant feedback from all of you in order to improve the sense of community through the course. So I think that pretty much is the end of what I had to share with you. And with that, I'd love to open it back up to feedback, because I believe we have time still, right, Bianca?
Yes,
we've got
we
a
have
few
time. Good job.
Oh, okay, I'm gonna
We have about 20 minutes. So we can open it up. Thanks, that was great. Great to see all of the different contributions.
Roxanne, that's great to hear. We have her 2-year-old grandson did some, so we can say 2 to 92. Yay, that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, so we'd love to hear from you guys now. What did you like about the course? What did you not like about the course? What ideas popped into your head? If you have any just nature questions you want to ask us or the course mentors, or any specific questions for Annie or for Andra, if she's still here, on their part, the grounding sessions or the biological illustration. I think Andrew Simon is maybe still here. He was, let's see, I'm reading a little bit from him. Andrew, I don't know if you're not, let me see. Andrew's up at Galliano, and he is the one that's doing all of the Salish Sea biodiversity networking, and they are actually going to working with the tribes up on Galliano Island, are going to pilot this course there with them, so that should be pretty fun. But let's open it up, and if you guys have any questions or feedback, feel free to chime in, unmute yourself and go.
So I'd like to thank you all for this opportunity, and a special reach out to Maria. She's been very responsive and helpful during the course, and I really appreciated it, especially during COVID, you know, being at home and working from home. And I had started I don't know if you all know the Biomimicry Institute. They were doing a 30 days of reconnection kind of exercise, and I had started doing that. I'd had some training with my work through them, and I was really delighted to see something happening locally. And you know, sitting here, being home all the time and being so connected to, you know, place, and then to have this deep dive into that was really rewarding, and I really appreciated that. So thank you.
Thanks, Karen. We really appreciated what you brought to the course with all of your amazing sketches and your insights. It was really, really cool to read. And that's one of the things that we were talking about is how, especially in a digital world, how do we share that more between participants, you know, to get that cohesiveness right off the bat and see, you know, have people be able to see what other people are doing. I think Maria did a good job of sharing some of that in the emails. But if anybody has ideas of how to do that better.
Yeah, I'd love to see like more of other people's experiences. And I heard a rumor that you might be considering different seasons. And I think that would be really great to continue to see your sit spot over time and how it evolves.
Brooklyn says, I really liked it. I found it relaxing and calming. Great. That was one of our goals, so it's good to hear. Was it, Brooklyn, did you have any specific things in that helped with that, or was it just in general being able to get outside and be connected to a spot? Or if anybody else has ideas about what it was that was relaxing and calming in this course, that'd be great.
Hi, it's Jerry. You guys did the most incredible job putting this together. You know, I found when I started taking the class, it was going to be a great diversion, a distraction from all the yuck that's happening. And I am finding that now, all the yuck that's happening is the distraction to my work out in my yard. It's totally flip-flop, you know? And I have been on such a learning journey, not only from learning about nature, but what is in your yard. It was like a whole universe woke up, and it was like 20 feet outside my kitchen window. And I can't tell you how important it's been to me, Maria and Bianca and Andra, to have your voice out in my sit spot. Oh, you know, it was so fantastic. I have learned about computers. I'm still learning about iNaturalist. I'm working on it. You know, but all of a sudden now I'm watercoloring and sketching, and my senses have awakened. They really have everywhere. When I take a walk, it is like, man, I was walking in a dream world before. So, you know, your course left this learner wanting more, and I can't. I mean, isn't that the best, you know, when you end teaching something that your students want more? The course is very dense, and now I feel that I can go through the sessions and take my time and add to my journal and to really read everything and all the videos. You know, it was, I was going quick so I could keep up, you know. So now I'm going to do the little slow stroll through Everyone Counts. So thank you. Fabulous. Congratulations.
Thank you, Jerry. Beautifully put. Yeah.
Hey, this is Annie. So inspiring. Thank you for sharing just that overview and feedback, and especially just like snapshots from everyone's plots and drawings and journals. That was awesome. And I would second that, Karen. I would love somehow for there to be a way to just to watch others' drawings and observations and what they're seeing. I didn't feel alone in any way, but I felt really curious as I was exploring my backyard plot. Like, what are other people seeing? And because that tends to just, set off more cues in your own brain. So that would be awesome. Yeah, like as it's going along, I'll think more on ways to do that, like platforms. One thing I just wanted to really congratulate you on is how quickly this came together. I've been a team member on a different curriculum for the last 6 years, and they're very different, but they're both deal with science and the natural world and art, and like there's a lot of crossover. So I can't help but compare them, and that's like we're 6 years in. And it's, longer, but like this, the amount that you've put together, like the core team, which is really small. And then all of us, I don't know, I consider myself like a satellite contributor, but like the core team has just put together this super rich resource in a short amount of time. And I hope like how amazing that is. And it's a testament to teamwork and all the foundational relationships that you've already built over the years, and just how quickly you were able to pull everything and everyone together and make it happen. It's really pretty awesome. So I love envisioning like, wow, what will this be in 5 years? That's pretty inspiring. And it seems like it has so much potential to grow in any number of different directions, and would just totally love to help with that in any way I can. So, yeah, thanks. I felt like I was participating about, 25% of how much I'd like to, but it's, looking forward to.
We're holding you to that, Annie.
Yeah.
75% more. All right.
But yeah, thanks. It's really an honor to be part of, and that was so cool to see more drawings from that session and from all the sessions, like the sound maps, and just, I'm a visual learner, so seeing all of those really rich images from everyone is so inspiring. So, thank you. Oh, and I put in the chat box, but I would love to connect you with science teachers in the tribes that I work with in that other curriculum. So just hit me up for that, because that's who I work with. So.
I wanted to add a couple. Did I interrupt somebody? No. Anyway, I wanted to add that speaking about the speed with which this is turned around, these guys were churning this stuff out, then I would try and edit it quickly, and then I was feeling for Vale, who was then getting it and then translating it into Spanish. So I was really impressed with how quickly you did that. So, and it's exciting to me that it's in Spanish, and I hope that we are reaching more people and can reach more people that way. And I started late, so I'm kind of right in the middle of it. And the thing that I really like about it so far is that I'm in a place in my yard that I have lived here 20 years, and a cedar tree is there that I like, and I've known the cedar tree, but I just feel like I'm looking at these, I look at things all the time in nature, and I'm in nature a lot, but it is a whole new way of looking at it when you're just sitting with this tree and looking at it through so many different lenses that you're providing. I just really, it is a real gift, and I'm just learning something new all the time. So thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. And I do want to add a huge thanks to Vale. I think that's a really good point. She was a rock star, because we were turning this out quickly. It was a response to something that the school wanted, and so we were doing it week to week, down to the wire, and to get not only the translations for the course text, but also the videos and the audio, and on top of that, looking for new books that are actually written in Spanish for the reading lists, and also contributing new viewpoints and good good suggestions for changes. It was like pat yourself on the back, lady. You did a good job, Molly.
Bianca, I'm curious what kind of feedback you've gotten from the school district, from teachers or admin. Were teachers able to successfully integrate it into their weekly flow?
Maria might be better to talk about that. And it looks like we've got some teachers here too. I think it was a mixed bag. I think our overall lesson was it worked well for 6th grade and up. It was a little harder for the younger kids because they needed more guidance and couldn't go through it all on their own. Some talking with Comunidad Latina, they tried, one of their youth leaders tried it with some families, and they were saying, you know, it'd be great and that to have a journal that just had everything in it, so they didn't have to go online. And Vale was talking about that right at the beginning of the course too, that would be a good addition. So there's definitely things, yeah, that could be improved. I think it was also, you know, thrown at teachers in Chautauqua especially that have to deal with all the different subjects. They got it like 3 days after school started, you know, so to have to try to integrate it would be kind of a challenge. Oh yeah, so Kara is, she says, yes, although I did have Jordan helping the whole way through. Okay, that's good. So Kara, what age for your class? For your
Yeah, hi, sorry. I'm wearing my pajamas, so I didn't turn on my camera. But yeah, I'm actually helping Jordan out with bio this quarter because we have an extra section. So I'm normally the chemistry teacher and it's bio, so 9th graders.
Well, I would just like to, this is Jane Neubauer. I would just like to echo what people have said. It's an amazing program that you put together so quickly. It's just amazing. And I, like Catherine, got to know a part of my, I've been in my place for 22 years, got to know a part of my garden in a different way. And I'm not finished either. And I'm still struggling with iNaturalist, but I'm working at it. And it made me go for those names that I've chosen never to learn. Because I said this was an avocation, not a vocation, so I didn't need to learn them. But it was fun to find them. And yeah, so I mean, but you guys, it's just amazing how quick you put it together and how well it worked. And I am incredibly impressed with all of you who worked on it. So thank you.
I just want to add that I really love the humor, and that's not common. I really appreciated that. And also, I really appreciated the literal diversity with age. I think a lot of people, a lot of organizations, they focus on school groups, and that's really important. But I really loved that you had the gamut, you know, anything from 2-year-olds to 92-year-olds. You know, I loved it, and I liked looking at the reading recommendations for the various age groups and things like that. So you provided a lot of flexibility, and I hope you don't lose that. I think that was really important.
Yeah, I'd love to add too that what strikes me as one of the main strengths of the program is the how interdisciplinary it is. Like it's one thing to be rigorous in any one or two of the areas that everyone counts works in, but it's a whole other thing to bring together art, science, language arts, cross-cultural. There could be more cross-cultural, but like, you know, languages, you know, different linguistic target audiences. Yeah, like that just strikes me as one of the main strengths here, and probably what's, I would guess, what you're being invited to talk more about it, you know, all over the region is, yeah, plus the humor. Such a good point. That was a good companion. But yeah, I don't see a lot of this either in terms of the breadth as well as the depth. It's pretty amazing.
Polly, are you talking? Try muting and unmuting.
Can you hear me now? Okay. Sorry. One of my side jobs other than working for this program is working in Vashon with 5 students from 3rd grade and 1st grade. And they had this program as part of their assignments, but I was also like pushing a little bit more these activities. And we are on the screens for about 4 hours every day. And this was their favorite activity, to go outside and do whatever was the session for that day. And then we had a game. My Alexa just went on. But yeah, they really love it. And I think it was really needed to have someone to help them. Honestly, I don't feel like their families wanted to take the course as a family activity, but just having someone with them to guide them was very helpful. And they also said that it would be helpful to make these sessions a little bit like funnier, but I agree that working on the program more to make it more simpler for these ages from kindergarten to 6th grade will be really helpful. But yes, thank you for taking us off of the screens and having the opportunity to go outside and have a purpose, because we go outside, but it's usually just like to play, and this was completely different. Like they really feel connected with nature and made great observations.
Great, thank you. That was good feedback. And I think, you know, one of the things that we we're thinking about here is that as we build this course, we have all these ages, right? And so when COVID is over, would people who were adults that took the class on their own, would you be willing at some point, some of you, to be mentors for some kids that were younger, you know, in the field, go to Chautauqua a little bit, or, you know, go to sponsor it for the kids in your neighborhood, or something like that. So that would be something that might be helpful in getting those young kids involved when the families couldn't or weren't that interested in being involved. So lots of different possibilities. So yeah, if you want to put in the chat whether you'd be willing to do that as a volunteer. We won't, just theoretically, we won't make a list of you and hold you to it right now, but if you think that would be a good idea, and we could do that someday. But it looks like it's already 9 o'clock, and I want to respect everybody's time. So thank you for participating. And if you think of more feedback, Maria and I are here, Vale's here, Annie, Andra, any of us, you can approach us and let us know your ideas. And you're really helpful in making this first pilot round rich and launching us into the second. So thanks very much. Mm-hmm. And with that, I guess we'll say good night. Goodbye.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Congratulations, you guys. Well done.
Thanks
for being here tonight and along the whole way.
Mm-hmm.